My name is Keith Skogstrom. I'm an artist slash furniture maker living in Chicago, Illinois. Currently living in Humboldt Park. My shop is in kind of a Goose Island slash Lakeview neighborhood over behind the North Avenue Home Depot, which is how most people find it. I grew up in Ohio, in a little town, not little, I guess a medium-sized town called Springfield, Ohio. The original space that we were operating out of here in Chicago was called the Sandbox, and that was based on this buddy of mine in college. Whenever he would pick me up from the art studios, he would drop me off and kind of, tongue-in-cheek bust my balls a little bit and say, oh, I'm dropping you off at the Sandbox, like where adults would go make castles and stuff, because he wasn't quite about the artistic lifestyle. But it was funny, so I kind of absorbed that, like most of the critiques I got in my life, I kind of made it, owned it, and then thought it was funny, and then would kind of put it back in their face. So we named the studio here in Chicago the Sandbox. So the studio that we're in right now is kind of the second version of that. So kind of to be determined what we're calling it, but it is a full-fledged professional grade studio. I guess the reason the new shop exists is I was working for a cabinet shop, and we were building furniture, and I was doing different things in terms of advancing myself and my skills in terms of woodworking. But one of the things I didn't feel comfortable doing in the old space was inviting artists and other creative types to come in and have an environment which they could kind of experiment and feel, kind of judged or critiqued, right? So like when you're starting out in these kind of practices where they demand excellence and kind of a high level of skill, it's very difficult to go in an area where people already have that level of skill. So i.e. the cabinet shop where I'm working, I had a lot of artists that were asking me for the opportunity to like build frames, learn how to do these things, and it just was never going to happen there. Insurance being what it is. So when we started the shop, the idea was, or at least the Sandbox, the idea was that we had a creative environment in which artists could come in and kind of learn a little bit here and there, but at the same time, wanted them to feel safe and have a place where they could learn the safeties of the tools, but at the same time, nobody's going to give them a hard time about not being as skillful as themselves or as the other guys or girls. We've developed it into a practice where it's open. I invite a lot of artists to come in here. Very few take advantage of it, but hopefully that changes. But in the meantime, I have some construction projects and contractors that come through, and we work on projects together here. The two biggest names that I think of when I think of people that I've worked with is definitely a woman named Sarah Spread and a guy named David Geodesic. Okay, for no ifs, ands, or buts, the biggest project I've ever done, the thing I'm most proud of, the thing that probably did the most for my career was the Violet Hour project. So Violet Hour is this super awesome bar, and everybody, now it's been popular for too long, so everybody hates it, but they shouldn't. It's incredible. They do a great job there. And it's this really cool speakeasy where you don't quite know it's there, there's no signage, and you walk in. And the urban legend that I know is that the model was that they were going to base it on these like Russian fall of the Soviet Union clubs. So what happened was all these warehouses go down, they have these huge places, right? And they want to have these Russian huge nightclub parties. So instead of telling people to come to this bar, which they can't because it's just an impromptu kind of rave at these warehouses, they would have some artist paint some elaborate mural on the front of the building. They would say, come to this building with a giant pink dragon on it, right? So people would find it. So Violet Hour, no signage and things like that, at least the way it's been explained to me, probably exaggerating, it's probably an urban legend, but they want to do the same thing. It was the same model. So instead of saying, come to Violet Hour, people go, well, where's Violet Hour? There's no sign. How do I find it? They would change the mural every 6 to 7 to 8 weeks. And that's how people would find it. Come to the place with a giant whale on it. When I did it was come to the giant place with a purple wall with the giant circles and cogs on it. And it was a great experience. I was asked by a fellow alumni of Ohio University to do a piece for him. So this guy calls me and writes this email. He goes, hey, I want to do this piece, and I want it to be about family and cabins and woods and furniture and all these different things. And I was like, you have the wrong artist. Like, I don't think you're talking to the right person. I can't do that. And he goes, well, I got $500. And I was like, okay, I'll do something for you. I found these old patent drawings that Thomas Edison had done. And they were based on like these voting machines and everything like that. But what I was really drawn to were the schematics, like the blueprints of these engineering machines, because I was fascinated by cogs and gears, and I think, especially with modern day society, you don't see those things. They're all encapsulated, even engines, you open up your hood and there's a plastic cover over that. So there's a lack of familiarity with like moving parts anymore, which is funny because technology has never been more part of our life. So I was fascinated by this. So I started doing these images with cogs and things like that, and one of the things I found that as I was doing them was that I wanted to do them on a hard surface that I was comfortable with. And I knew plywood really well. And I knew kind of these Sharpies, like the way they bled, and I knew the way they moved, and I knew kind of how to control them a little bit more. So I started doing these drawings on these panels for this gentleman, and as I did that, I kind of worked with the material and found out that like, there was a lot of things I could do with it in terms of pushing its volume or its depth. So I could draw the Sharpies on the panels and then sand it, and that would become like this light blue faded kind of background thing. And then as I would draw back over that and crisp it up, what I found was that it gave it this depth. So then I was hooked. Like I immediately then was able to find this kind of implied kinetic, implied kinetic distance in my work.
Did you continue pieces on the scale?
Oh, I did. Yeah, I did a piece for Evil. Well, it's so funny because when you do stuff like this, everybody has advice, right? And fortunately, I was very public, so I had a lot of advice, but some of that sometimes it's good advice. So what happened when I did Violet Hour? Everybody said, "Well, those are amazing shapes. You have these really cool round shapes. What if you just built circular shapes?" Well, of course, at the time, the reason I did it, as I've said, is I didn't have the technical skill. I didn't know how to build a round, perfectly, shaped and symmetrical cog, even though that's what I wanted to do. So that pushed me to the next installation, which did have dimensional shapes, and it was a nice push. And then, of course, I do that one, and then everybody goes, "Well, now you have to make them all motion. They have to have this interactive quality, and they have to have this." And that's the hard part about being an artist, right? You have to take in what everybody says because you can't be removed from the world. You're ultimately responsible for the things you put in it. So you can't ignore it all, but at the same time, there's so many suggestions. You have to be able to weed through what matters to you and what doesn't, and that's been difficult. I'm currently in the works. I'm doing a project for North Coast Music Festival coming up, which I've done annually for the last 3 years. And each year it's grown a little bit in terms of what the festival's asking us to do. And then in turn, there's a group called Elder Tree and then Ava Gray that curate the kind of space. So they bring artists in from the city to do projects. So that's my main focus right now is that.